After delivering the attack, the old man gripped the sword's hilt with one hand, sheathed it, and locked eyes with Beihan. Standing behind him was the vice commander, Yang Guang, who calmly informed him that all 300 geniuses were present. He then requested the old man to prepare for the stage and lead the opening ceremony. The old man sheathed his sword and began making his way toward the stage. As he did, the crowd in the camp buzzed with conversation. Many had heard rumors of various Tianjiao camps across the Jiangnan area, but none had ever been led by a figure as powerful as a king-level warrior. The thought was terrifying to them. Standing dozens of meters away, they knew the king of the celestial sword could easily kill them with just a single move. One of them mentioned to the others that this was very unusual, as it was known that the old master had been living in seclusion. He couldn't understand why the master was coming out now. Some had overheard the instructors talking quietly, suggesting that it seemed the old master had personally requested to take on this role. They speculated whether he might be looking to recruit a disciple. If that were the case, they knew they had to perform exceptionally well. However, many of them realized that someone of his caliber would only consider the very best, so they shouldn't get their hopes up. Tang Ying stared at the old man in disbelief, stunned that the legendary Celestial Sword King had actually appeared. Bai Feng, standing beside Tang Ying, gazed at the old man with wide eyes, unable to contain his excitement at finally encountering the living legend in person. Meanwhile, Xiao Beihan fixed his eyes on the old master with unwavering determination, resolving to defeat Jiang Wushuang once the camp started, hoping to make a strong impression on the revered figure. Jiang Wushuang cracked his knuckles, excitement surging through him as he realized they had managed to bring the old master. He was determined to make him his mentor. Mu Hanqiu, meanwhile, clenched her fists tightly near her face, her mouth agape in astonishment. Jiang pointed at the old man with a confused expression and asked Luo Sandao if she recognized the powerful figure. Excitedly, she rushed over to Jiang, clenched her fists, and with a joyful look, confirmed that she did. She had heard stories of his legendary feats since she was a child and began reminiscing about the old man's incredible achievements. One day, a fearsome red dragon appeared, but the old man leaped onto its head and, with all his might, drove his sword into its skull, forcing the dragon to open its mouth and scream in agony. Mu Hanqiu placed her hand under her chin, closed her eyes, and began to reflect. She explained that, although both were at the level of a Seal King, the senior Celestial Leaf King was the most revered figure in her grandfather's eyes. Her grandfather had once urged her to become his disciple, but the old man had turned her down. Initially, she was quite frustrated by the rejection, but later she learned that many descendants of the Zhen Empire, and even Invincibles, had also been refused. Jiang looked at the old man, his expression puzzled, and asked if they were certain it was that difficult to become his disciple. Mu Hanqiu moved closer to Jiang, her expression earnest, and asked if he was joking. From what she knew, both Jiang Wushuang and Bai Feng had previously been turned down by the sword god. Given their formidable skills, it was almost inconceivable how challenging it must be to become the old man's disciple. Hearing this, Jiang's expression shifted to one of shock as he pondered just how difficult it might be to become the old man's disciple. Luo Sandao then stepped forward, pointing towards the sky with a serious expression, and explained that they might not fully understand the challenge involved. However, the old master had only taken on 2 disciples in his entire life, and that had been over 20 years ago. Jiang recalled the old man clinging to the tree like a madman, and remembered how, while sheathing his sword, he had asked if Jiang was interested in learning from him. Jiang closed his eyes, struggling to reconcile the eccentric old man who climbed trees with the esteemed king of the Celestial Sword everyone spoke of. To him, they seemed like entirely different people. With a bead of sweat rolling down his cheek and a forced smile, he replied that he now understood everything. The old man took the stage and cleared his throat to capture everyone's attention. With a stern expression, he introduced himself as Gu Kaitian, the chief instructor of Tianjiao camp. Resting both hands on the podium, he reminded the crowd that, as they were aware, the Tianjiao camp in the Jiangnan region had been underperforming in recent years due to the fights here being little more than a show. He warned that if anyone didn't give their all here, they'd face certain death on a real battlefield where true dangers awaited. He informed everyone that the number of monsters in the world was increasing. Grasping the microphone firmly, he smiled and urged them to showcase their talents fully. He emphasized that they needed more capable geniuses to make a more effective selection and better prepare for the challenges ahead. This year, he had introduced a new rule for the Tianjiao camp in the Jiangnan area, which he called the Death Quota. At this announcement, Vice Commander Yang Guang, standing behind him, looked visibly alarmed. With a fearful expression, Yang Guang attempted to intervene and stop Gu Kaitian. However, Gu Kaitian raised a hand to silence him, and with a composed smile, assured everyone that he had the final say in the matter. Therefore, he would bear full responsibility for any incidents that occurred. Yang Guang, now sweating profusely, looked bewildered as he pondered what Gu Kaitian meant by death rate. His superiors had never mentioned this before, and there had never been such a rule in the history of Tianjiao camps. There were many formidable geniuses among them, and he worried this might incite chaos. Gu Kaitian raised the microphone to his mouth, speaking with a stern expression as he declared that starting today, 10 participants would be expected to perish in each round of the test. He added that anyone wishing to withdraw could do so immediately. Panic spread among the participants. A young man glanced fearfully at his friend, confessing that while the situation was dire, he couldn't withdraw, as doing so would bring shame to his entire family. His friend, visibly trembling, swallowed hard and replied in a quivering voice that he didn't want to die. Wu Shuang, standing with his arms crossed, remained composed. He smiled to himself, thinking that such a move was typical of the senior Celestial Blade King. In his view, the Tianjiao camp in Jiangnan should have implemented this rule years ago. Xiao Beihan turned his gaze toward Jiang, a smile forming on his lips as he concluded that this rule had been crafted specifically with Jiang in mind. When the camp began later, Xiao Beihan was poised to fulfill 2 of the old master's quota himself. Jiang eyed Xiao Beihan with curiosity, pondering his intentions. With a calm demeanor, he concluded that with this quota in place, even if the conflict escalated and he ended up killing Xiao Beihan, Uncle Jigang and the others would have less to worry about. After several minutes without any withdrawals, Gu Kaitian, holding the microphone in one hand and resting the other on his waist, couldn't help but smile. It seemed to him that everyone had a sense of pride. The 4 vice commanders stood behind him. Extending his hand to one side, Gu Kaitian raised his voice and declared that the entrance evaluation for the camp had officially begun. In the first round, with 300 participants, half would be eliminated. Gu Kaitian grasped the hilt of his sword and, drawing it with a stern expression, informed them that 150 advancement flags had been hidden throughout the camp. He emphasized that he didn't care what methods they used to find the flags. The round would conclude at dawn on the second day, and those who collected the flags would move on to the next stage. Gu Kaitian unsheathed his sword, directing its blade towards them with a gleaming gaze. He urged them to fight with confidence and determination, whether they chose to go solo or form alliances. They were even permitted to dismantle the entire camp if they chose. In essence, he wanted to witness their bloodlust. With that, he raised his sword high and declared the test officially underway. At his command, everyone began to scatter. Many recognized that with their current abilities, the most prudent strategy was to search for flags, hide, and steer clear of more ruthless competitors. For them, this was the safest strategy to advance to the next round. As everyone scattered, Xiao Beihan's smile grew, his body enveloped in a potent blue aura. Drawing his sword, he extended it to one side and began to stride towards Jiang. Gradually closing the distance, Jiang, standing beside Mu Hanqiu, remained silent. Jiang extended his arms to the sides and fixed his gaze on Xiao Beihan, instructing Mu Hanqiu to search for nearby advancement flags while he handled the situation. Mu Hanqiu, puzzled and anxious, asked if Jiang was certain about his decision. Before she could finish her question, he took a defensive stance and firmly told her it was an order. Upon hearing Jiang's command, Mu Hanqiu and Luo Sandao quickly turned and began to run. Meanwhile, Xiao Beihan, enveloped in a powerful blue aura, laughed derisively and taunted Jiang, questioning if a rookie like him, who hadn't even undergone a second transfer, really thought he could be a hero. In response, Jiang extended his hand to one side, releasing the toxic mist from Little Nine. Despite the impressive power of Xiao Beihan's sword energy, it was still significantly weaker compared to Xiao Yuanwu's. Although Jiang was stronger than before, he questioned whether he could handle Xiao Beihan with just poison, without revealing the presence of the mother insect. With a steady gaze, Jiang told Xiao Beihan to stop talking nonsense. Xiao Beihan, deciding not to waste any more words on someone he deemed already defeated, unleashed a powerful slash towards Jiang. As Jiang readied himself for defense, enveloped by Little Nine's poisonous mist, someone intervened. A figure called for Xiao Beihan to halt and hurled a series of small knives, shattering the attack into fragments. The person who intervened was Tang Ying. Clutching a handful of knives, she glared at Xiao Beihan with evident anger. Xiao Beihan, gripping his sword with one hand, turned his serious gaze towards her and demanded to know what she was doing. Jiang, standing nearby, looked over at Tang Ying with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Jiang began to wonder if she was the renowned female assassin. Tang Ying put her hands on her hips, marched up to him, and demanded to know if he had forgotten their agreement with Bai Feng. They had planned to target Wu Shuang once the camp began, but Xiao Beihan kept diverting his attention to trivial matters. Tang Ying suspected that he might be using these distractions as a cover for his fear of Wu Shuang. Xiao Beihan clenched his fists in anger and demanded to know who suggested that he was afraid. Ignoring Jiang, both he and Tang Ying turned and headed toward the area where Wu Shuang was located. Seething with rage, Xiao Beihan asked Tang Ying where Wu Shuang was, resolving to confront him first, before dealing with the lesser issues later. Tang Ying pointed toward the forest and explained that Wu Shuang had headed in that direction while Bai Feng was currently pursuing him. Jiang deactivated Little Nine's poisonous mist and observed the scene with a sense of relief, realizing that the situation had shifted in his favor. Though he didn't know much about Tang Ying, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was intentionally aiding him. After they had moved away, Tang Ying glanced back, placed a finger to her lips, and winked at Jiang. It became clear to him that she was indeed aiding him, though he was puzzled about her motives since they didn't know each other. With a sad expression, Tang Ying looked down, revealing that she was the niece of Tang Jin. Her aunt had tasked her with discreetly watching over Jiang Chen in the Tianzhou camp. However, given her current abilities, she couldn't confront Xiao Beihan directly. Her only option was to use Wu Shuang's name to delay Xiao Beihan's actions. A man with black hair, carrying a bow on his back and several flags in his hands, approached them. He knelt before Xiao Beihan and explained that his father was a subordinate of Xiao's grandfather. The 3 advancement flags he carried were a token of his loyalty. He introduced himself as Huang Yongchao, the 6th venerable transfer descendant. Xiao Beihan, eyeing him with a serious expression, told him that the flags were unnecessary. Instead, he suggested that if Huang Yongchao truly wished to prove his loyalty, he should assist him with a task. Tang Ying crossed her arms and stayed silent as Huang Yongchao, kneeling before Xiao Beihan, pledged his unwavering loyalty. Tang Ying watched with concern, realizing that Jiang would now have to handle the situation on his own. However, she hoped that Mu Hanqiu and Luo Sandao would be able to offer him some protection. Meanwhile, Luo Sandao had secured 2 advancement flags, which she now held in her hand. With a joyful smile, she closed her eyes and informed Jiang that she had just found them. She approached Jiang and placed the flags on the table. With one hand resting on his waist, Jiang calmly suggested they take the flags first, as he planned to explore another area. Luo Sandao placed both hands on the table and said they would help him search for the remaining flags together. Mu Hanqiu, standing beside her, crossed her arms and stayed silent. At that moment, an arrow shot through the air at high speed, heading straight toward them. Jiang quickly sensed the threat, placed his hand under the table, and warned them to be careful. Just before the arrow could reach them, Jiang hurled the table into the air with all his strength, intercepting the projectile. The impact was so forceful that the table exploded into splinters. Luo Sandao looked up in alarm, her face filled with panic and fear as she tried to comprehend what was happening. She swiftly took cover behind Jiang, gripping his arm with both hands while cautiously peering out to assess the situation. On high alert, Jiang demanded to know who was attacking and if they were trying to steal their flags. Meanwhile, Mu Hangqiu drew her 2 daggers, holding them firmly in both hands, and assumed a defensive stance. The attacker was revealed to be Huang Yongchao. He leapt into the air, drew his bow, and aimed directly at Jiang. As the arrow crackled with intense energy, he locked eyes with Jiang and declared that he wasn't interested in the flags. His sole intention was to take Jiang's life. With his gaze fixed and the arrow glowing even brighter, he readied himself to release the deadly projectile. They looked up and saw that the attacker was Huang Yongchao. They informed Jiang that he was a hidden profession known as the Extreme Archer of the Sun Chaser, ranked at level 39, with his father being a venerable of the 6th transfer. Huang Yongchao was a subordinate of Xiao from the Jiang Empire. Luo Sandao, uncertain if her eternal earth shield could withstand the attack, felt a wave of concern. With a steely gaze, Huang Yongchao fired the arrow. It hurtled towards them with immense speed, its blade expanding and glowing with energy. As the arrow closed in, Jiang took action. He instructed both of them to move aside, then leaped into the air, his eyes gleaming with resolve, and charged directly at the oncoming attack. He extended his hand, releasing Little Nine's poisonous mist from his palm. With a fierce expression, he declared that while he could endure many things, an attempt on his life was unacceptable. If they sought to kill him, they shouldn't blame him for being merciless, as someone had to meet the old master's death quota. Luo Sandao, standing behind Jiang, instinctively clutched her chest in fear. Meanwhile, Mu Hangqiu, holding 2 daggers, looked at him with a surprised expression, wondering what he planned to do. Jiang unleashed Little Nine's poisonous mist, aiming it at Huang Yongchao to block the attack. The mist was so powerful that it not only blocked and shattered the attack, but also started advancing toward him. As Huang Yongchao hovered in the air, the poisonous mist drew closer. Holding his bow with one hand, he looked around, and upon noticing the poison, couldn't help but panic. He had been under the impression that Jiang had life-type abilities. With a look of terror, he urged the others to come out of hiding and attack together. However, before he could finish speaking, Little Nine's poisonous mist reached him, making contact and beginning to corrode his body. The mist tore him apart, causing him to scream in agony. As it expanded, the insects within the mist started to devour his body. His companions, gripped by fear, turned their backs on him and fled. They wanted no part in facing someone who had awakened the hidden poison class. If even a long-range shooter like Huang Yongchao couldn't handle him, those with close combat abilities stood even less of a chance. They felt fortunate to have escaped just in time, believing they would have been cannon fodder otherwise. Within seconds, the insects started consuming Huang Yongchao's body. Standing nearby, Jiang controlled the swarm. Meanwhile, in the observation room, Yang Guang and Gu Kaitian watched everything happening in the camp through surveillance cameras. Gu Kaitian observed Jiang's strength, impressed by his abilities. He couldn't help but praise Jiang, noting that he possessed not only the creation class, but also the poison class. Yang Guang, standing behind him, was left speechless. With a look of astonishment, he began to wonder how Jiang had managed to so quickly defeat a prodigy in the 2nd transformation stage. To him, Jiang Chen was incredible. He couldn't understand why the Night Watch in Chuizheng City hadn't reported anything. As he pondered this, Gu Kaitian turned to him with a serious expression and instructed him to inform the others and bring some great masters of the spatial system, as this was an urgent situation. They needed to be ready for an emergency transfer at any moment to prevent Jiang from killing too many people. Hearing Gu Kaitian's command, Yang Guang snapped out of his trance and agreed, hurrying to inform the others. As he ran, he clenched his teeth with worry, determined to act quickly while the Elder's orders were still in place. He knew that if the prodigies truly started a massacre, the consequences would be unimaginable. Gu Kaitian placed his hand under his chin and began observing Jiang. He then coughed to catch Yang Guang's attention. Yang Guang, hearing the sound, stopped running and turned around with a surprised expression, asking if there was a problem. Deep down, he wondered if the old man was having second thoughts about the situation. Gu Kaitian, still with his hand under his chin and staring at the ceiling with a distant gaze, instructed him to bring 10 third-level ferocious beasts. Gu Kaitian added that the beasts should be released separately and ordered the advance flag to be placed on each of them. Yang Guang turned, gave a military salute, and, with a confused expression, responded, "Understood." He couldn't help but be impressed by the old man's plan. By using the advance flag, they could direct the demons to fight for it, preventing harm to others in the process. Tang Ying, Bai Feng, and Xiao Beihan surrounded Wu Shuang, drawing their weapons and preparing to attack. Wu Shuang, in contrast, stood with his arms crossed. Bai Feng, who had been battling him for several minutes, was visibly exhausted. He rested his hand on his chest, where he bore a wound, and began to pant heavily. Wu Shuang glanced at them and reiterated that even if they combined their efforts, they wouldn't be able to defeat him. He questioned whether they truly wished for their own demise and taunted them, asking if they would take pride in winning a 1-on-3 fight. Meanwhile, Xiao Beihan tightened his grip on his sword, causing the blade to radiate a fierce blue energy. He stared intently and explained that while winning with superior numbers was dishonorable, he couldn't avoid fighting opponents who were not dull. Just then, the loudspeaker blared to announce that Huang Yongchao had been eliminated by Jiang Chen. The news shocked everyone, as they couldn't believe Jiang had made the first kill. Unlike the others, Wu Shuang remained composed. Xiao Beihan, his concern growing, reflected on Huang Yongchao's situation. Despite his average strength, Huang Yongchao had been competent and was in the second transformation stage. In a camp full of geniuses, Huang Yongchao, who was ranked among the top 50 and was far stronger than Xiao Yuanwu, had been eliminated in the blink of an eye. Even she, as an assassin, wouldn't have been able to take down Huang Yongchao so swiftly. Bai Feng looked up at the sky and, with a smile, concluded that the Tianjiao camp was brimming with hidden talents. Wu Shuang then raised a hand to his face, glanced at them, and with a smile, asked if they weren't going to face an expert like Jiang. They ignored him and readied themselves for another attack. However, just before they could strike, the camp announced that 10 third-level fierce beasts would be released, each carrying an advancement flag. Anyone who captured an advancement flag would earn additional points in the ranking. Everyone in the top 10 would receive a reward, with the first-place prize being 100 million. Hearing this, Xiao Beihan and the others quickly jumped back and moved away from the area. Wu Shuang, with his arms crossed, began to smile. As everyone dispersed, he stood still, thinking that the King of Celestial Sword had provided them with new toys. He found this acceptable and resolved to compete for and capture the blue flag. Meanwhile, Jiang glanced to the side, surprised to recall that they had just entered the camp and the first-place reward was already set at 100 million. To him, this prodigy camp seemed exceptionally generous. If he secured first place and claimed the rewards and resources, the insects would be able to reproduce more quickly. At that moment, something enormous began to plummet from the sky. Jiang, who was nearby, went on high alert, wondering what it could be. A giant mutant beast, resembling a wolf, fell from above. Luo Sandao, standing beside him, explained that the first fierce beast had fallen next to them. Jiang looked at the beast with a puzzled expression and realized it was a third-level beast. Nearby, Mu Hanqiu, in a panic, warned everyone to be cautious, noting that the beast's strength was comparable to a level 90 awakening. Gradually, the beast began to rise. Luo Sandao observed closely and noticed that it was in a state of paralysis. She asked if they should take advantage of the situation. As the beast slowly regained its footing and consciousness, Jiang moved forward, preparing to attack. His hands began to emit poisonous mist as he approached. He decided to seize the opportunity and asked the others to step back. Just as he was about to attack, a powerful slash came towards him. Reacting quickly, he jumped and dodged the strike at the last second. Confused, he wondered who had launched the unexpected attack. A few seconds later, he landed on the ground, clenched his fist tightly, and began to wonder what was going on. The attacker turned out to be Xiao Beihan, who was standing atop the beast's head, holding his sword in one hand. He stared at Jiang with a smile, thinking that not only had Jiang eliminated Huang Yongchao in an instant, but now he also had the audacity to try to claim the advance flag. Jiang extended his hand, releasing Little Nine's poisonous mist, and challenged Xiao Beihan, saying that if he wanted to fight, they should stop talking. In response, Xiao Beihan leaped into the air and unleashed a technique called Heaven and Earth Wind Dragon Slash, sending a powerful slash toward Jiang that began to destroy everything in its path. The attack clashed with Jiang's, dissipating the poisonous mist. Xiao Beihan landed on the beast's head, his sword radiating powerful energy. He mused that it was no surprise Jiang was so arrogant, given his hidden poison-type abilities. While the poison type was reputed to be difficult to manage, Xiao Beihan thought it was insignificant compared to the power of his sword's wind. Mu Hanqiu clasped her fist against her palm and with a serious expression thought that Jiang was in danger, as the wind could counter and defeat poison-type abilities. She believed they needed to assist him immediately. Luo Sandao, standing next to her, looked at her in surprise and explained that Jiang's poison was not ordinary. She cautioned that if they intervened, they might only cause more problems. Jiang assumed an offensive stance, his body enveloped in poison. Fixing Xiao Beihan with an intense gaze, he decided it was time to finish this. He unleashed the technique called Poisonous Mist Dragon, summoning a giant dragon made of poison. The dragon opened its mouth, ready to attack. Seeing its size, Xiao Beihan panicked, realizing this was serious. He knew he couldn't just stand by, so he gripped his sword tightly and ran his fingers along the blade. Realizing that a simple strike wouldn't disperse the poisonous mist, he decided to absorb it instead. The dragon opened its mouth, ready to strike. Xiao Beihan raised his sword toward the sky and used the forbidden spell technique, Immortal Swordsman of Blue Lotus, summoning a giant flower behind him. The flower started to absorb the poisoned dragon. He taunted Jiang, telling him to watch as the energy of his sword would consume all of the poisonous mist. Jiang's eyes gleamed as he smiled, questioning if Xiao Beihan was serious. With the sword energy blocking their view, it became even easier to consume. Little Nine appeared, closed her eyes, opened her mouth, and began to devour the flower that Xiao Beihan had created. To her, this sword energy was absolutely delicious. As a result, Jiang gained 2,000 devouring value. He observed Little Nine and realized she was consuming the entire flower. He raised his hand towards the sky, and in an instant, the flower created by Xiao Beihan shattered, releasing poisonous mist. The mist then surged towards Xiao Beihan, attacking him. The poisonous mist hurled Xiao Beihan backward, causing him to crash to the ground as he cried out in pain. Jiang clenched his fists tightly, and with Little Nine having absorbed the flower's energy, the poisoned dragon grew even larger and more formidable. As Xiao Beihan lay on the ground, clutching his sword with one hand, he struggled to believe what was happening. He couldn't fathom what kind of poison could nullify a sword's energy. As Jiang's poison dragon attack surged toward him, Xiao Beihan embraced himself and activated the life gem, generating a protective barrier around his body. Rising to his feet and gripping his sword, he observed that his poison couldn't penetrate the life gem's shield. He concluded that Jiang was doomed to fail. He observed Xiao Beihan and reflected on how the Xiao family always seemed to find second chances. However, he was concerned about the cameras scattered across the battlefield and couldn't afford to let the insects reveal their true form. Turning to Luo Sandao, he calmly asked if she could create an opaque earth shield to cover the entire area. She clenched her fists tightly and assured him she would give it a try. Raising her hands toward the sky, her energy surged upward as she activated the technique called Earth Shield. A protective barrier then formed around the area. Xiao Beihan looked up in confusion and asked what was happening. Luo Sandao, having expended a great deal of energy to create the shield, rested her hands on her knees, lowered her head, and began to pant heavily. Meanwhile, Jiang continued to release the poisonous mist from Little Nine. He turned to Xiao Beihan and asked if he could guess how Xiao Xuanwu had died.